Hello and welcome to another video. In this one we'll cover the whole front line, starting out in the Kherson region, followed by the Zaporizhia front, then the Bakhmut front, and ending with the Luhansk front. But first, a quick word from our sponsor, Surfshark VPN. What was that? I got hit by a cyber attack? Don't worry, I got Surfshark VPN. Surfshark VPN masks your presence on the internet, protecting you from cyber attacks and many other threats on the internet. If you want to be protected on the internet, just like me, download Surfshark today by clicking on the link in the description and using the code WUWU, WUWU, for 83% off, as well as another 3 months for free. Thank you to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring this video. So, starting out in the Kherson front, we see that the Russians have announced a partial evacuation of the Kherson city as well as the surrounding villages. We see that the Russians are trying to evacuate most of the civilians in the area to avoid any civilian casualties as they turn this area into a battlefield. They're expecting the Ukrainians to launch a large-scale offensive in this region, and as such they are preparing for the city to become a battlefield. The Ukrainians have so far not engaged in any fighting other than some probing attacks here in the northern area. Other than that, they are just gathering a lot of forces. As I mentioned in my previous video, most estimates estimate around 60 to 100,000 troops. So the purpose of these probing attacks is to see if the Russians have any weak points which will allow the Ukrainians to push through and take control of the area and break through the Russian defenses. This will allow them to get the strategic upper hand as they through the occupied territory by the Russians and allowing them to take control of the front line, allowing them to advance and establish control over the region. So the Ukrainians' objective here is to gain control of this eastern area, followed by a large-scale offensive here in the western area. The reason for this is that there has been a lot of training here by the Dnieper River, where the Ukrainians are training to conduct a large-scale amphibious assault landing in this eastern region of the Kherson region, which will allow them to attack this open area, mainly focusing on the Zaporizhia nuclear power plant, but also on this other area here, allowing them to advance towards the Novakhovka Dam and taking control of it, securing a passing through the Dnieper River. So most likely you'll see the Ukrainians trying to push down this road, after which they will conduct a naval amphibious landing across the river, or just doing it here in the northern area around the Enerhodar nuclear power plant. Other than that, Putin had held a speech earlier today where he has announced martial law in these 4 regions, which is the regions of Kherson, Zaporizhia, Donetsk and Luhansk. Putin has also ordered the creation of a special coordination council under Prime Minister Mishustin to centralize and coordinate special military operation related decision making, including economic questions. As you can see in this picture here, a part of the Russian mobilized forces have not received pay as they should have. As such, they are complaining here in a video that was recorded and sent out and reported on by The Guardian. So this council is created to solve issues like these, as well as equipment issues and so on. This means that they are recognizing that they actually have these supply and logistical issues with the mobilized forces as well as the regular forces, and that they are actually doing something to try and solve these issues. Moving on to the Zaporizhia front, we see that the Ukrainians and the Russians are both concentrating large amounts of forces here in the area. This means that they are both preparing for the other side to make a move first. The Russians are using this opportunity to launch a large-scale artillery barrage on the Ukrainian fortifications that they are currently building. The Ukrainians are now focusing on building defenses and preparing for a Russian potential offensive. I've made a video on that as well. The large shelling is according to Ukrainian sources. Now moving on to the Bakhmut front, we see that the Russians are slowly but surely advancing. They have now reached the western side of the Bakhmut city. They have crossed this river, most likely by this area here, which seems to be very shallow on a normal day. But right now the rivers are actually extra shallow as there's not been a lot of rain during this year, during the fall season of this year. This means that the Russians had an easy time passing through the river in this northern area. While here in the south, the Russians have also attempted to cross through from this northern area and allowed them to cross into the city itself, while trying to hold the Ukrainian forces here in the south of the village of Opitne. They are trying to go around and advance towards the western area, trying to cut off the village rather than going inside of it. while at the same time they have successfully passed through the river here, and they are still fighting here in the northern area. This whole area is contested, so I'm not sure exactly who controls it, but all of this is reports from a Russian source. He is a veteran of the Russian army, and he has connection within the Russian army that is currently fighting here, as well as the Wagner PMC, which means that he has sources from the ground itself. That means he has sources straight from the front line. And that's it for the Bakhmut front. Now, moving on to the Luhansk front, we see that the Ukrainians are still doing these probing attacks. They're trying to figure out where the Russian weak point is. They've also started doing some probing attacks here in the central area, right next to the Svatove city, which is their target for this offensive. As I mentioned in an earlier video, the Ukrainians have about 40,000 soldiers here on this front line, which means that they are ready for an offensive. However, they still haven't figured out where the Russians' weak point is, while at the same time the Russians have decided to take the initiative here in the northern area, where they captured Horobivka and are now fighting in the direction of Dvorishne, which is the eastern part of this twin city similar to Kupiansk and Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, where a city is split up into two by a river. So on this eastern part of the river, the Russians are advancing towards the Vorishne. They're trying to regain control of the eastern bank of the Oskil River, while trying to avoid a Ukrainian breakthrough here in the south, allowing them to focus on one front instead of focusing on two. If the Russians successfully manage to capture this area here, they will probably attempt to go southwards and try and cut off this highway, which is the highway that the Ukrainians are using as their main route towards Svatove, as it allows them to have a good supply line, as the highway is the best road to use for supplies. This is also with the fact that the Ukrainians are using Kupiansk as their own supply hub to support and send logistics to the front line. As you can see, there's this highway that is going towards Svatove, and then there's also this highway down here that connects with Senkov and goes and is connected to the city of Izium. This means that the Ukrainians are trying to hold control over this area and use this as a springboard for the invasion towards Svatove, while the Russians are trying to build up fortifications and leave no gaps, and the Ukrainians are currently searching for one. That's going to be all for this video. Thank you all for stopping by, and I hope to see you again next time. If you like this video, consider leaving a like and subscribing to get notified for my next upload, and it will help me out a lot. Thank you all for watching, and have a great day.